The morning of December 16, 1944, arrived shrouded in darkness and fog. It was just after 5:30 in the morning when the mist settled thick across Schnee-Eifel Ridge, along the border where Belgium and Germany met. American soldiers of the 106th Infantry Division occupied this high ground, their positions laid out across the frozen terrain. They had no idea what was about to crash down upon them. Across no man's land, German troops were stirring. Soldiers from the 18th Volksgrenadier Division stood ready for the massive assault that would launch the Battle of the Bulge. Each man carried the Karabiner 98K, the same bolt-action rifle his father had carried in the First World War. It was a weapon that had proven itself through decades of warfare. From the muddy trenches of 1914 to the frozen steppes beyond Moscow. Precise, reliable, a rifle that had served Germany through some of history's greatest struggles. But as the hours ticked away before the assault, these German soldiers didn't know they were about to face an obsolete doctrine against modern American firepower. The mathematics of combat had shifted in ways their command structure hadn't fully grasped. A German infantryman with his bolt-action rifle could achieve 15 accurate shots in a minute if he worked his bolt quickly and carefully. An American soldier armed with an M1 Garand could deliver 20 to 24 aimed rounds in that same 60 seconds. That difference, multiplied across hundreds of soldiers, would reshape entire battles. The German military had built its faith in the Karabiner 98K over many decades. The Mauser action, perfected since 1898, represented the absolute peak of bolt-action rifle engineering. German training manuals drilled this philosophy into every recruit. A soldier should be a marksman, not someone who simply sprayed bullets. One well-aimed shot, the manuals insisted, meant more than 20 wild rounds fired in panic. This philosophy had carried German forces to stunning victories across Europe, and the leadership believed it would continue to do so. The same rifle had served faithfully through colonial campaigns, through the trenches of the Great War, and through the early blitzkriegs of the Second World War. German infantry tactics centered on the MG-42 machine gun for delivering suppressive fire, with riflemen positioned to take careful, deliberate shots at enemy positions. It was a system that had crushed Poland in mere weeks and conquered France in 6. Surely this system would continue to work, yet German training had a critical flaw built into it. Officers taught their men to practice at ranges between 400 and 800 meters, distances that seemed to promise dominance on an open battlefield. Combat statistics, however, told a very different story. Most engagements actually happened at ranges under 300 meters, distances where volume of fire mattered far more than long-range marksmanship. That disconnect between training and reality would prove catastrophic. The first real warning had come at Kasserine Pass in North Africa during February 1943. German forces encountered American troops equipped with M1 Garands in large numbers for the first time. The Germans won that battle tactically, but reports filtering back to high command spoke of troubling patterns. German units documented encountering unexpected volumes of rifle fire from American positions. Soldiers from the 10th Panzer Division reported seeing American infantry maintain continuous fire while executing tactical movements. Maneuvers that seemed nearly impossible with bolt-action rifles that required chambering a new round after each shot. The casualty records from Kasserine showed something even more disturbing. During pursuit phases, when American troops were actually retreating, they somehow maintained steady, organized defensive fire that inflicted heavy losses on attacking Germans. But German leadership dismissed these warnings. The Americans, they reasoned, were poorly trained and badly led. Their equipment surely couldn't make up for superior German tactical doctrine. That confidence would prove dangerously misplaced. The Italian campaign from 1943 into 1944 gave the German army extended exposure to American firepower, fighting across terrain that should have favored German defenders. Mountains and valleys typically benefited defenders armed with long-range rifles. Yet at San Pietro in December 1943, the 29th Panzer Grenadier Division faced something unexpected. American riflemen maintained suppressive fire while maneuvering across difficult ground, each soldier acting as his own base of fire rather than waiting for automatic weapons to do the heavy lifting. American combat interviews recorded immediately after the battle showed how differently these troops fought compared to German expectations. Defensive positions holding the winter line, especially around Monte Cassino, reported increasing difficulty in countering American patrol tactics. American patrols armed with Garands generated enough firepower to suppress German positions while moving tactically, forcing defenders to stay pinned down. German defensive doctrine had always called for defenders to pop up from cover between enemy shots to return fire. With semi-automatic weapons, those gaps simply didn't exist anymore. Wehrmacht units filed reports to higher command, acknowledging that American infantry possessed superior firepower at all distances under 500 meters. The Normandy invasion brought this firepower disparity into brutal, undeniable focus. The 352nd Infantry Division, defending Omaha Beach, consisted of experienced soldiers positioned in prepared defenses with carefully pre-registered fields of fire. Every advantage seemed to favor the defenders. Yet American soldiers from the 1st and 29th Infantry Divisions, despite taking terrible casualties climbing those bluffs, maintained constant rifle fire that kept German defenders suppressed. German fortifications designed to withstand artillery barrages were gradually worn down by the sheer volume of 30-06 rounds pouring from M1 Garands. The brutal close-quarters fighting in the bocage demanded engagements at 50 meters or less, distances where rate of fire trumped marksmanship every time. American units on D-Day advanced while firing continuously, a tactic called marching fire that American officers had developed and refined. During heavy combat, American rifle companies expended an average of 5,000 rounds daily. German rifle companies, by contrast, fired only 1,500 rounds in comparable situations. The difference wasn't recklessness, it reflected fundamental differences in tactical capability. Americans could sustain suppressive fire because every rifleman carried a semi-automatic weapon. The M1 Garand, designed by John C. Garand and adopted by the U.S. Army in 1936, had fundamentally transformed infantry warfare. It fired the same 30-06 cartridge as older rifles, but featured an 8-round clip fed by a gas-operated semi-automatic action. Compared to the Karabiner 98K, it could sustain higher rates of accurate fire, carried more ammunition in its magazine, and weighed only slightly more. German intelligence officers examined captured Garands closely. A technical report from Kummersdorf Proving Ground acknowledged the rifle's mechanical reliability, despite its greater complexity. But German analysts focused on the individual weapon rather than grasping how it transformed squad tactics. The real advantage lay in how American squads deployed firepower. Each U.S. rifle squad could generate between 160 and 200 rounds per minute of aimed fire. A German squad, relying on rifles alone, managed only 40 to 70 rounds per minute. While German squads depended on their single MG-42 to suppress enemies, American squads achieved similar results through combined rifle fire from every soldier. The entire tactical framework had shifted. The Battle of the Bulge in December 1944 proved the absolute superiority of semi-automatic rifles in modern warfare. The Wehrmacht launched its last major offensive with veteran troops and the element of surprise, yet found their tactical system couldn't work against American firepower. Kampfgruppe Piper, spearheading the 6th Panzer Army, encountered American soldiers from the 99th Infantry Division near Lanzerath on the morning of December 16th. Despite being outnumbered, American platoons delayed the German advance through sustained rifle fire that prevented German infantry from effectively supporting their tanks. Near Bastogne, the 101st Airborne Division, surrounded and heavily outnumbered, held their perimeter largely because M1 Garands provided superior firepower. German attacks following traditional doctrine, advancing under machine gun cover, were broken apart by the volume of American rifle fire. Small unit actions throughout the Ardennes revealed a consistent pattern. German infantry trained to expect pauses between enemy shots discovered no such pauses existed when facing semi-automatic weapons. American soldiers fired while moving, reloaded quickly with their clips, and maintained continuous suppression. The industrial capacity behind the M1 Garand mattered as much as its battlefield effectiveness. Springfield Armory and Winchester. Repeating Arms manufactured 4,880,000 M1 Garands. Production at Springfield peaked in January 1944, when the facility produced 3,936 rifles daily. By contrast, the Germans produced only 462 semi-automatic rifles, a ratio of nearly 9-to-1 favoring America. While fewer than 5% of German infantry carried semi-automatic weapons, virtually 100% of American infantrymen received M1 Garands. American factories achieved this production miracle through revolutionary manufacturing methods. Machine tools, assembly line techniques, and standardized interchangeable parts meant that workers without firearms experience could perform single repetitive operations that collectively created thousands of rifles daily. Springfield Armory transformed from a traditional government arsenal into a modern production facility using techniques borrowed from the automobile industry. The German military attempted to close the firepower gap. The Gewehr 43 entered production in 1943, but never reached sufficient numbers to equip more than small specialist units. The revolutionary STG-44 assault rifle, appearing in late 1943, pointed toward the future of infantry combat. Yet only 425,000 were produced, nowhere near enough to change battlefield arithmetic. German tactical manuals underwent revision in 1944 to acknowledge American firepower superiority. New defensive tactics emphasized deeper entrenchments, greater reliance on mortars and artillery, and avoiding direct firefights with American infantry whenever possible. These changes represented tactical retreats, not genuine solutions. American intelligence observers noted that German units increasingly avoided offensive operations requiring infantry assaults, recognizing their disadvantage in direct fire engagements. This defensive mentality, born from material inferiority, prevented the Wehrmacht from regaining the initiative after breaking out from Normandy. The M1 Garand transformed combined arms tactics beyond simple rifle engagements. German doctrine required infantry to advance alongside tanks, protecting armor against anti-tank teams. American rifle fire made this coordination extremely difficult. During Operation Cobra, the American breakout from Normandy in July 1944, German panzer units reported their accompanying infantry couldn't maintain contact with advancing armor due to devastating small arms fire. Tanks advancing without infantry support proved vulnerable to bazookas and artillery spotters. The Garand also enhanced American defensive strength. When the Wehrmacht counterattacked near Mortain in August 1944, the U.S. 30th Infantry Division held critical positions largely because they could generate sustained defensive fire. Every American foxhole produced continuous aimed fire, making German infantry attacks prohibitively costly. American forces had perfected semi-automatic rifle tactics earlier in the Pacific Theater, fighting against Japanese forces armed with similar bolt-action rifles. Marines and Army soldiers developed techniques maximizing their firepower advantage. Vertical envelopment, suppressing enemy positions with rifle fire while maneuvering to attack from unexpected angles, proved equally devastating against German forces. The tactical flexibility provided by distributed firepower allowed American units to maintain pressure while moving, a capability German soldiers armed with bolt-action rifles simply couldn't match. This firepower revolution demanded a completely new approach to ammunition logistics. Higher rates of fire meant consuming vastly more ammunition than older systems. Out on the battlefields of Europe, American combat divisions faced an extraordinary challenge. They simply burned through ammunition at a staggering rate. Compared to equivalent German units, American forces needed roughly 10 times more small arms rounds. The U.S. Army rose to meet this colossal demand through an intensive industrial effort that would have seemed impossible just years earlier. At Lake City Army Ammunition Plant alone, workers turned out more than 3 million rounds of 0.3006 ammunition every single day by 1944. That's not a typo. Every day. Getting all that ammunition to the soldiers who needed it required something equally revolutionary: the Red Ball Express. That legendary truck convoy network that became the lifeline of frontline combat units. The system prioritized ammunition above almost everything else. Your average American infantryman carried between 80 and 100 rounds into combat. compared to the 60 rounds carried by German soldiers. But here's the crucial difference. American troops had constant resupply coming behind them, which fundamentally changed how they could fight. This abundance of firepower shaped American tactical thinking from the ground up. The U.S. Army developed a technique called reconnaissance by fire, where soldiers would deliberately shoot at suspected enemy positions to force a response and reveal where the Germans actually were. German commanders found this tactic infuriating and baffling. They trained their troops to conserve ammunition, treating each round like it was precious. To them, the American approach of just spraying fire seemed reckless, wasteful, and yet undeniably effective. Fort Benning became ground zero for rethinking American infantry training. The infantry school there created entirely new courses built around what the M1 Garand rifle could actually do. Instead of emphasizing precision marksmanship, they focused on rapid target engagement. Soldiers learned instinctive shooting, how to quickly find a target and put rounds downrange without fussing over a perfect sight picture. In 1943, they introduced the train fire program, which used pop-up targets at different distances to simulate the chaos and confusion of actual combat. During training, soldiers fired hundreds and hundreds of rounds, building muscle memory until rapid shooting became almost automatic. This stood in sharp contrast to German training methods, which emphasized deliberate, carefully aimed shots with minimal ammunition expenditure. American doctrine evolved to take full advantage of what the semi-automatic rifle could deliver: sustained rapid fire. Consider what this meant tactically. A fire team could now execute fire and movement with much greater flexibility. Any soldier could provide covering fire while teammates maneuvered, rather than relying on designated roles. That traditional distinction between who provided fire and who maneuvered started to blur when virtually every soldier could maintain a steady stream of bullets. When American forces assaulted prepared defensive lines in autumn 1944, they showed exactly how devastating this approach could be. Semi-automatic rifles proved capable of breaking through fortifications that had seemed nearly impenetrable. German bunkers and strongpoints had been specifically designed to channel attackers into kill zones where machine guns would cut them down. But they hadn't really accounted for one thing: the sheer cumulative weight of sustained rifle fire. The U.S. First Army reported that M1 Garand fire alone could suppress the apertures of German bunkers, allowing combat engineers to get close enough to place demolition charges. A single American platoon could pour down enough fire to overwhelm multiple defensive positions at once, preventing those positions from supporting each other. The fight for Aachen in October 1944 really showcased where the M1 Garand's advantages became most pronounced: in brutal urban fighting at close range. In tight quarters, the ability to fire 8 rounds rapidly without ever working a bolt proved genuinely decisive. American soldiers could clear buildings and rooms far more effectively than their German counterparts, who were still working their bolt-action rifles. The rifle's mechanical design also proved surprisingly robust under truly horrible conditions. During that brutal winter of 1944 and 1945, the M1's gas-operated system kept functioning in extreme cold that absolutely crippled other weapons. The enclosed operating rod and gas tube resisted mud and debris far better than the exposed bolt mechanism of the Kar-98K. Both rifles demanded maintenance, sure, but the M1's semi-automatic action meant troops spent far less time vulnerable to enemy fire while reloading. That distinctive ping sound when the 8-round clip ejected. Soldiers initially complained about it, but in combat it turned out to be an advantage. You could reload by feel alone, even in complete darkness or poor visibility, simply pressing the clip into the receiver. German soldiers had to manually load rounds one at a time or fumble with magazines, a much slower process requiring real dexterity and fine motor skills. It was a fundamental difference in how quickly you could get back into the fight. The M1 Garand embodied an entire American industrial philosophy applied to warfare: mass-producing something good enough rather than handcrafting something perfect. Each rifle cost about $85 to manufacture in 1944, roughly comparable to what the Kar-98K cost Germany. The difference? American factories could produce M1s 3 times faster. That advantage rippled through the entire supply system. Standardized ammunition, interchangeable parts, and simplified maintenance meant fewer headaches for logistics planners. When an M1 got damaged, you could often just swap in components from another rifle and get back to business. Repairing a Kar 98K, though, often required a skilled armorer and specialized knowledge. The American system was built for mass production and replacement. The German system was built for individual craftsmanship and careful preservation. The strategic consequence was staggering. America could equip its rapidly expanding army with modern weapons while simultaneously cranking out thousands of tanks, aircraft, and ships. Germany, already straining under resource shortages and getting pounded by air raids on its factories, simply couldn't keep pace. They couldn't match American production capacity even when they were using simpler bolt-action rifles. When Germany finally surrendered in May 1945, American Army operational research teams launched extensive investigations into what had actually made the difference in infantry combat. They pored over combat records, conducted prisoner interrogations, and ran statistical analysis. What they found was striking. American rifle companies generated 340% more small arms fire than German equivalents. Engagement durations stretched from the typical 5 to 10 minutes up to 30 to 45 minutes, entirely because of the ability to sustain heavy fire. American infantry could actually advance using their own rifle fire for support, without waiting around for machine guns or mortars to catch up. General George S. Patton famously called the M1 Garand the greatest battle implement ever devised. That assessment reflected something bigger than just the rifle itself. It reflected how a single weapon had fundamentally transformed the nature of infantry combat. The M1 enabled an entirely new tactical doctrine centered on firepower, movement, and aggressive action. German military professionals, writing in the years after the war, would later acknowledge that they'd completely misjudged how important semi-automatic rifles were. General Franz Halder, who served as chief of the German General Staff, noted in his post-war memoirs that the Wehrmacht had drastically underestimated something crucial: how superior firepower and advanced infantry weapons could overcome all their advantages in training and experience. When West Germany rearmed in 1955, the newly formed Bundeswehr made a decision that told you everything you needed to know. They immediately adopted semi-automatic and automatic weapons. They chose the FN FAL, designated as the G1, and later switched to the G3 rifle. No German military force would ever again make the mistake of fielding bolt-action rifles as their main infantry weapon. That decision came directly from hard-learned lessons in the forests and hedgerows of World War II. Internal Bundeswehr planning documents made this crystal clear. German forces must never again face a technological disadvantage in basic weapons. The experience of encountering superior American firepower left scars that shaped German military thinking for decades to come. The M1 Garand's success rippled outward, influencing military thinking globally. Every major power adopted semi-automatic or automatic rifles in the years immediately after the war ended. The Soviet Union fielded the SKS and then the revolutionary AK-47. Britain developed the EM-2. France introduced the MAS-49. All of these weapons reflected the same lesson America had demonstrated. Semi-automatic superiority worked. The Korean War would prove that lesson correct all over again. Initially, American forces armed with M1 Garand rifles held real advantages against North Korean and Chinese forces still equipped with older bolt-action rifles. That advantage gradually closed as communist forces received Soviet semi-automatic and automatic weapons. But the tactical innovations that had been developed for the M1 Garand lived on, shaping how infantry would fight for generations to come. The real revolution was conceptual. Instead of thinking about most soldiers as ammunition carriers for the machine gun teams, armies now recognized that every single soldier could be a significant fire contributor. That concept of distributed firepower became standard throughout Western militaries. Modern squad tactics, emphasizing flexibility and rapid decision-making by soldiers at the lowest levels, evolved directly from capabilities that semi-automatic rifles first provided. Today, the ability of individual soldiers to lay down effective suppressive fire while maneuvering, remains absolutely fundamental to how infantry operates. The M1 Garand illustrated something profound. Industrial capacity could deliver decisive tactical advantage. America's ability to mass-produce complex weapons while keeping quality high demonstrated that 20th century warfare required industrial muscle as much as military skill. That lesson applied far beyond small arms. The same production philosophy that created millions of M1 Garands also produced tens of thousands of tanks, aircraft, and ships. Integrating mass production techniques with military requirements fundamentally revolutionized how warfare logistics and planning actually worked. Beyond the pure numbers, the M1 Garand provided something intangible but equally important. Many American soldiers were civilians conscripted into service with minimal military background. That rifle gave them something tangible, a technological edge over professional German soldiers with years of training. This boosted morale, confidence, and encouraged aggressive tactical execution. For German forces, experiencing the opposite effect was demoralizing. They faced superior enemy weapons that their training and experience simply couldn't overcome. Post-war research indicated that awareness of American firepower superiority actually damaged German recruitment, training morale, and combat effectiveness in the war's final years. The M1 Garand's superiority over the Kar-98K meant far more than a simple technological advantage. It marked the definitive end of an entire era in infantry combat. The age of the bolt-action rifle, which had dominated battlefields since the 1890s, ended in the hedgerows of Normandy, in the forests of the Ardennes, and in the rubble-filled streets of German cities. The Wehrmacht entered World War II confident in their doctrine, their training superiority, and their combat experience. They discovered that American mass production and semi-automatic technology had rendered their entire approach to infantry combat completely obsolete. German bolt-action rifles, regardless of the skill of the soldiers carrying them, simply couldn't compete with the volume of aimed fire that American semi-automatic weapons could produce. The transformation was total and irreversible. No major military force would ever field bolt-action rifles as primary infantry weapons again. The lessons learned between 1943 and 1945 were unmistakable. Firepower, production capacity, and technological innovation could overcome traditional military virtues. These lessons shaped military thinking for the rest of the 20th century and beyond. The M1 Garand did far more than help win World War II. It fundamentally revolutionized what infantry combat actually meant. Every single time a German soldier paused to work his rifle's bolt while American bullets snapped past overhead, the future of warfare was being written. That future would belong to nations able to harness industrial power to equip their soldiers with decisive technological advantages. The Wehrmacht expected to fight a war where training, doctrine, and experience would prove decisive. Instead, they faced an enemy whose industrial democracy had given every soldier a semi-automatic rifle and essentially unlimited ammunition. In that mismatch lay not just tactical defeat, but the collapse of an entire military philosophy. The M1 Garand had made the bolt-action rifle and all the military doctrine built around it obsolete. The German army never expected it, they never successfully adapted to it, and ultimately they never recovered from it. The 8-round en-bloc clip had defeated the 5-round stripper clip, and with it an entire way of thinking about warfare. The age of industrial warfare had decisively arrived, delivered one semi-automatic shot at a time.